as a vegan, right? Like it would be catastrophic to my worldview.
Oh, that's true.
There's certainly a most wanted for plant murder lists out there, and I am high on that list
You
in the
better
plant
watch
community.
out. Hello.
Hey, welcome back.
Welcome back to Whyte Noise, your background podcast of semi-useful, probably mostly random
Mostly
information.
not useless. Yeah. Oh, wait a second. Not useless?
Not useless. I
Intent.
don't know. Intent. Today I am so excited because we actually have like an expert guest, which normally doesn't happen. But we're joined by Farmer Nick, as you're famously known. Nick, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
I know you from Instagram. I'm a huge fan. I followed you for a long time, but you're on Netflix. You have a book. You are an extremely successful person in the world of plants.
I mean that's very generous of you. But yes, you can find me all those places. The world of plantrpreneurship, as I call it, has been very good to me. These past, oh my gosh, it's been almost 10 years since I started gardening in my parents' backyard, but it's been quite the journey.
Oh, and thank you for saying that. I was going to try and say planterpreneurship, and I knew I wasn't going to get it right. So that's why I left that one out. I was like, he's going to say this. It's okay.
So I hope you don't mind me asking. So how did it like happen? I mean, obviously you just said with your parents in the backyard, but like, when did you hit that moment? You're like, this is it.
So basically, my whole life I was an athlete. I played basketball and baseball in high school, played baseball in college, and for so much of your life you're told like this is your identity, right? This is what you do. And then you graduate college and that identity you've had for 22 years is kind of gone, right? You kind of have to redefine yourself. And I was at this inflection point moment and my job, I was working corporate job in New York City at IBM, and growing up in Westchester, I grew up in White Plains. I was going to live at home and commute to the city, like many young kids out of college did. And my mom said, listen, if you're going to live here rent free, you have to do something around the house. Good mom advice, right?
Yeah.
She was right. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? She goes, well, you love food. You love being outside. Why not start a garden? Now, I knew nothing about plants. We never owned a plant inside the house growing up. We didn't do anything. So I went to Home Depot and I bought a couple pieces of wood and some tomato plants and soil, threw them in the ground. And literally from the moment I tasted the fruits of my labor, the actual fruits of my labor, I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing in the whole world. And each year the garden grew more and more. Did that for 3 years while I lived up north there. And then started collecting houseplants when I moved to the city, started taking on clients, started doing terrace landscaping, all this other stuff, classes at New York Botanical Garden. So it really just blossomed from there.
Oh,
That's awesome. I'm envious, actually. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was right place, right time, you know?
well, that's perfect because our word this week was photosynthesis. So yeah, and again, you never know what you're going to get. This is the first time we have somebody who actually knows about this. So I'm so curious as to what it's going to be like with us being like, let us tell you about photosynthesis. I'm an actor. Ryan works in finance. We know next to nothing about plants, I think. Aside from the fact that I've always had plants everywhere I've gone. I've lived all over the world, and one of the first things I always buy when I like nest is a plant. I always find them really soothing, and I usually name them. And I'm that weirdo who will like find them weird, like and be like, "This is Lucy." I hope I don't kill her.
I do love outdoor landscaping.
It's a good blend when you have kind of inside, outside moments of green in your life. I think we need more of that. And I'm all for naming your plants if it helps you take care of them. That's a win.
Actually, during COVID, I got really into gardening. I moved to a house in Jersey City that had this backyard that honestly looked like a place where you would get murdered. Like it was so no one had taken care of it. And it seriously looked like you should go back and there should be like a mystical creature hiding in the bushes being like, for 3 wishes, I will, in 10 years, I'll come for your soul. You know, like.
And then Ryan popped out.
And then Ryan, that's how Ryan and I met.
That's how we met.
He was living in my backyard and I'm still waiting on those 3 wishes. But so one of my COVID projects became became fixing it up. And it was, a patio, but had all these very large built-in planters. And it was so much fun actually learning about plants and like making the backyard a beautiful space. I also learned I'm very allergic to poison ivy, and it was very overgrown with poison ivy.
Ooh, yeah.
Which I didn't know it was because I'm an idiot, and went in a t-shirt and just started like pulling it apart. And I regretted that decision.
We've all been there.
Anyway, all right. Well, shall we jump in? Shall we try this?
Yeah.
Which one of us would you like to hear attempt to talk to you about photosynthesis? To go first.
You were talking about the backyard and your gardening journey, so let's hear it. Let's go.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
All right, Michael. Are you ready?
Yes.
Set. Go.
Okay, so, Nick, you don't actually know me very well, but the people who do know that this is not going to be a leap. I know Ryan is very technical. He's very much a researcher, so I feel like he's going to get into a deep dive of what photosynthesis actually is. When I think of photosynthesis, obviously I think of plants, and that makes me think of Judi Dench. So I also really love little old British ladies, and people who know me know this. So I have a passion for little Judi Dench, and Judi Dench has a passion for trees, and that's why I think of her. So she actually made a documentary called My Passion for Trees.
Really?
And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I watched it again this morning just to refresh my memory. So her two favorite things outside of Shakespeare are trees and champagne. And now she's at a point in her life where she really just wants to enjoy both of them. So she made this documentary that she shot over a year called My Passion for Trees. And it's mostly about the trees in her yard. So she has this big estate in Sussex, and she's turned it into basically like woods. And she plants a tree for every friend of hers who dies. And so she opens it by walking around being like, oh, look, there's Anne and there's Richard. And that tree sort of looks like Richard. He was very tall and thin and a bit pasty. And like, it's a big white tree that's kind of flaking. And it's really cute. It's broken up into seasons. And for each season, she has a Shakespearean sonnet. And then she has experts who come in and teach her about trees. And watching it again, I was like, I actually learned some stuff, Judi Dench. And it's literally the most adorable thing because she is just in awe. They have a guy who comes in and he hooks a sound system up to a tree and he has her listen to what the inside of a tree sounds like. And watching this just tickle her is so cute. But also you get to hear it and it's so cool. It's like this dark rumble. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard a tree. I hadn't.
I have heard recordings of that, and you can hear like there's things happening inside.
It's crazy.
Inside the bark. There's a movement of water, nutrients, all these different things. And the trees can actually expand and contract depending on temperature and other conditions in the climate. So there's a lot there.
I had no idea. See, I'm as excited as Judi Dench was.
Doesn't grass scream when you cut it? Like they actually have the recording of...
There's some theories out there that there's a high-pitched frequency that's emitted. Whether we want to anthropomorphize it enough to call it a scream, I think would be a tough. But
a little bit of a stretch.
There are sounds that plants emit when they are pruned.
Well, and a fascinating thing that they talk about in the documentary too, how they communicate but also defend themselves. Like at one point in the spring section, she talks about how spring is this beautiful time, but also that's when they get attacked by a lot of things. And she talks about aphids and different things like that. And they talk about the trees that emit a scent when they're under attack, which I didn't know, that like calls, and then birds smell it and they come and eat the bugs.
Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, is the technical term. And basically what happens is that a tree unfortunately, the trees that are upwind are the ones that get attacked first and won't get their response, but they emit this response that will either create something that happens in the tree itself that will kind of like try to deter the other pests or whatever is attacking it, but it goes downwind. So that tree will say, hey, I'm being attacked. Here's the game plan. The other trees act accordingly so that they can prepare themselves for whatever's coming. And that can be defense of the tree. It could be calling in a predator with a symbiotic relationship with you call it integrated pest management kind of, right? So it's the tree's own version of calling in reinforcements to take care of what's attacking it. So there's lots of interesting science and different scenarios there with how trees can communicate.
Yeah, well, that's what she got excited because the ones that she has, they're ones that call on a specific kind of bird. And she's like, that's why those birds are here. And he was like, yeah, those are her, like that expert. He was like, yeah, they're here to actually protect your trees calling for help. And of course, she loves that. And then the one in fall was interesting because it's like obviously fall is a really active time. And she brings in an expert on fungi, and about how there was one specific kind that connects the roots.
So the mycelium network is
Yes!
extensive.
And how they can communicate using those and share nutrients. I was like, this is fascinating.
It's even more so fascinating when you realize that the communication is not, and transfer of nutrients, which is a big thing in the mycelium network, is not just random either.
Oh.
It's, hey, this tree is struggling. This tree might be smaller. This tree lost a limb, got cut down, whatever. Let's shuttle more energy and more resources to this tree that's struggling because it can't reach the sunlight as easily.
Oh.
So when you think about that and you're like, maybe trees understand that like taxing billionaires is like a good thing. Like,
I was gonna say,
imagine that. We took the lessons from the trees. What do you know?
They work so much better as a team than we do. That was my takeaway from it. And even hers, she was like, we have a lot to learn from trees. And she was like, I feel so much more at home here with them than I do with people. And it's like, yeah, after all of this, it makes total sense. So I loved that. And as far as the tree communication, so what that actually made me think of, it's funny when you talk about like the plants screaming and stuff, that sent me on another sort of side thing. Back to this, there's a chapter in a book I read that was really fun. The book is called The Theory of Everything Else by Dan Schreiber. He's the host of this podcast, No Such Thing as a Fish, if you know that. It's this really fun British, like, facty podcast. But one chapter is about this guy, Cleve Baxter. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a polygraph expert in the 1960s. He was actually one of the top polygraph experts who worked with the CIA and for police departments in the 50s, 60s, 70s. He was really into plants. And one day, he was also really into acid. So, like, it might have been on an acid trip. He lived in San Diego. But I watched a short film about him as well that they made. And he was just curious one day. So he hooked his plant up to the polygraph machine. And he wanted to see if it would have any reactions. And he claims that he had a thought that he was like, oh, what if he hooked it up to a specific leaf and he was like, what if I set that leaf on fire? What would the plant do? And just having the thought, it started to freak out, like the reading. And so he was convinced that the plant could read his mind, that it was a telepathic plant, that it knew he was going to set it on fire before he even did it, and it got scared. So then he was like, oh, plants not only have emotions, but they can read minds. So then he went on this whole thing, and that became his, like, side hustle, was hooking his polygraph machine up to various plants and, like, running different experiments. He had one that they feature in the film where he left because he was like, my own emotions throw off the plant. So he had a little thing of prawns set on a timer, and he left. And after a certain timer, the prawns were flipped over into boiling water, and then the plant was right next to them. And when he came back and they set up a camera, and it really does, when the prawns fall in the water, the plant freaks out. And he's like, it's because the plant had empathy for the prawns dying in front of it. So this became a whole thing. So the chapter in the book, which I love, it was about a murder case. And he used a plant as a witness because a guy got murdered, brutally murdered, in his apartment. And the only witness was his houseplant. And this guy, Cleve Baxter, was like, the plant will be able to pick out the murderer. That is your only key witness. And they actually tried it. This was one police department that was willing to give this a whirl. So they had a list of suspects. They hooked the polygraph thing up to the plant, and they brought the suspects in front of the plant one at a time. And one person, the plant freaked out. And then later it went to trial. They couldn't use that as evidence, but that person ended up being the murderer. And he was like, see, the plant identified the killer because it watched the guy brutally murder its owner.
Jeez. Wow.
Isn't that nuts? And he was like, but nobody would take him seriously. Obviously, in the scientific community, no one would take him seriously. Really only like hippies in the 60s thought this was awesome. And like sort of like wacky filmmakers, like the short film that I saw, were like, this is cool.
I'm going to tell you, Michael, this actually connects into what I will be talking about a little bit, which is kind of interesting. So, yeah. And
I always thought this was kind of a joke. Like my sister used to talk about this as like, plants have, feelings or whatever. And the whole thing thought that plants feel pain and that sort of thing. But when I did a deeper dive into Sweet Cleve, I was like, maybe they do. Maybe they like see and sense a lot more than we think. I don't know if you have a reaction to that, but
I I hope you're wrong.
why have you done some pretty devastating things in front of plants that could incriminate you now?
I mean, I as a vegan, right? Like it would be catastrophic to my worldview if I found out
Oh, that's
that
true.
the plants were just as conscious and thinking as our animal counterparts here. So that would be tough. Also, just the number of plant deaths that I have caused is pretty significant, probably more so than most people on the planet. Because when you work in landscaping, right, you're dealing with thousands and thousands of plants at a time, and there's perfectly healthy plants. For like, hey, the client says doesn't want this here, we gotta get rid of it, and not every plant can be transplanted. So there's certainly a most wanted for plant murder lists out there, and I am high on that list
You
in the
better
plant
watch
community.
out. One day, they actually, I think based on him, some filmmaker I read about made a horror movie about plants that kill people.
Oh yeah, they're coming for me. I know it.
I hate to say it, but yet you've done so much for the plant community. They'd be really conflicted.
I'd like to think I've done more good than bad, but
Yeah, they might let you go on this one.
The talking trees and the trees being upset always makes me think of that scene in Lord of the Rings where the trees end up getting
the
angry.
ants.
Yeah. And that the I can't remember the bad character's name, tore them all down to do that tower around where Sauron lived.
Saruman. Yeah.
I think about that every time. Like you were talking about them communicating and coordinating and looking out for each other.
And their main general was Grandma Willow from Poca, and she was leading the charge. Little did we know. All right, that was my 10 minutes. I assume I heard the thing.
Yeah, you're good.
Great. That thus ends my little presentation about Judi Dench and Cleve Baxter. Ryan, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, great. And your time starts now.
So photosynthesis, I think it's pretty obvious that it makes life on Earth possible. It's the underlying principle that has provided energy to virtually everything that underpins what we are today. It operates at around 15,000 tons of biomass are created every second in the world, which all drives back to the effectiveness of photosynthesis. So I alluded to this last week when we got the word, but one of my latest kind of nerdy kicks is in quantum biology and quantum science that's behind how biology operates at the effectiveness that it does. And one of the only explanations for it is that a number of these things operate under quantum principles, photosynthesis being one of them.
And I understand about 3 of those words. So,
Nick, are you still with me? I hope so.
Keep going here. I'm interested.
So within a leaf, chlorophyll is the chemical that captures sunlight and turns it, it doesn't turn it into energy. It's what produces the electron that allows ATP to be created. The short is that red spectrum light from the sun, a red photon, if you will, passes into chlorophyll, knocking an electron into a higher order around a magnesium atom. And that electron manages to make its way to the energy center, where then thus the ATP process starts. And it ultimately results in the food or the sugar that the plant creates to grow. Now, where this starts to get into quantum science and quantum math, and by the way, this is a principle that came out in around 2007 and was originally laughed at. There was a paper, and actually I think MIT scientists were the first ones to be like, yeah, this is bullshit. But there's now research that shows this is very possible. So if you think about the biology of a leaf, chlorophyll and where it captures life relative to where energy is created are set in 2 different places. And chloroform is packed in various levels at all over the place within the pockets where it lives in the leaf. Now, photosynthesis operates at near 100% efficiency. So for the photons that are consumed, the electrons that are thus released, almost every single one, if not 100% of it, ultimately gets turned to energy. Now, that means that that electron, regardless of where it sits, must perfectly navigate through the leaf to arrive at where energy is created. And this is where the quantum science potentially takes place. It means that that electron knows exactly where to travel within the leaf to get to where it turns into energy. It doesn't bounce around to multiple different places and travel around the leaf. It follows the path of least resistance to ultimately arrive where it is. So, okay, so it turns out both photons and electrons are quantum particles, and it means that they exist both as an actual particle that can be measured as well as a wavelength. I didn't know this, but when you think about an electron, so you think about an atom and an electron circles around it. So we like to apply the orbital principle when we think about planets and the moon circling the Earth. But the reality is that electrons don't actually circle an atom in any set pattern. They operate in a realm of probability. So you may think that the electron is located in one place, but it's actually potentially in any one place around the atom at any given point. Again, another quantum principle. So I was like, okay, so what's the best way I can think of to equate how this kind of operates? And have either of you been laying in bed asleep and, like, let's say a flash of light goes off, let's say lightning, for example, goes off, and that flash of light will wake you up. You ever had that happen?
I think so.
You didn't actually observe that light, but you did. The wavelength of the light traversed through everything, managed to go through your eyelid and hit your retina, thus causing that flash. Now, you've woken up now, and you go and look out the window, and then you look out the window and you see a flash of lightning this time, and you've observed the photon. So if you think about it, the wave of light managed to traverse through virtually everything to become present in your eye. So the photons from that flash of lightning managed to be present in your eye, but then you turned around and you watched the lightning, you actually observed the photon. So what is happening is the electron that's then created in photosynthesis is operating as a wave where the energy center essentially sees the wave and observes it, thus allowing it to become present in the place where it turns into energy. So it traverses through all paths at once, observing the one that's most efficient, thus just going to that point. The other kind of, like, Michael, going back to what you were talking about, a lot of the quantum principle talks about the fact that there are multiple realities layered on top of each other. And this is why, like, quantum math is so incredible, because you can be all numbers at one time. And so in other words, if there are a trillion different codes, all trillion codes are present at that moment, meaning that the computer can land on what the right one is in that moment. So if we start to talk about plants living in multiple realities, and if plants truly are quantum species, or they're using quantum science to operate and live, they could be using some sort of quantum principle to operate through reality. So, and it's also worth noting that this whole idea of quantum biology traverses into a lot of different things. Like, I forget what the bird species is that has, they believe the way it works is the bird has two quantum entangled electrons. And if two electrons are quantum entangled, it means that if one is operating in one direction, the other is operating in another. And thus, with that entanglement, they have the ability to see the magnetic fields as if it's vision going around the Earth. So they can navigate in pure darkness because they're actually seeing the magnetic fields of the Earth due to these quantum entangled electrons. And then another kind of interesting one, and this is one I want to do more reading in, and there's a lot of very good, like, educational papers out there, is that consciousness itself might actually be a quantum principle. And we do have quantum materials in our brain, which then gets into this idea that our dreams actually a manifestation of a different reality or a different quantum place or quantum realm. I have stuff down on observability and coherence, but I did kind of touch on that. Like, so in other words, the presence of an electron or a photon in a given place becomes present as a result of being observed, but otherwise operates as a wave. And actually, if I was going to nerd out a little bit more, people who believe in do we live in a simulation often refer to often look at these kind of behaviors of waves versus particles as evidence that this is actually just a programmatically created reality that we live in. I don't believe in that. I actually believe more so in the quantum science that we're figuring out. But I think the kind of interesting thing is like the whole stuff like you hear about what like IBM is doing with like the quantum computing is they're attempting to do it with in a state of coherence versus decoherence. So eliminating all sort of observability or all sort of factors that influence how two quantum entangled items operate. But the reality is that we're starting to have evidence now that you actually don't need super refined spaces and places for quantum activities to take place. They operate in and around us.
This was the most dense presentation we've had so far. Normally we're just like Trader Joe's is cool.
I love this topic. I think this is one of the most interesting things that like I think that we're talking about right now. I think it's one of the most interesting things in science. Like it is, and it's the first time that I personally have been able to make sense of quantum science and quantum math, and I've actually invested the time to kind of start to get it.
I love it.
So Nick, I apologize. I went full nerd on that, and I hope it was all right.
You went there. No, I'm all for it. I mean, I think I would not. I was not the person to connect quantum theory to plants, but it worked. You got there.
Oh, thank you. How much time do I have left? Did I burn it all, or?
That was exactly 10 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
I wonder too with if there's something evolutionary about it, how like if plants work at a near 100% efficiency, I mean, they've been around for so long. Do you think like early days plants worked at like 90% efficiency? And as like time has gone on, they've just like mastered existence in a way that like other species haven't because we haven't caught up. I don't know. That might make no sense, but
I know I think about this quite a bit actually, because we as humans, right, we start to assert our own dominance over nature, both in practice and in thought. And what I mean by that is, in practice, we tear down trees, we rip up forests, we do this, and that. And in thought is we make the assumption that we are the most intelligent life on Earth. And that assumption, I think, is a scary one, because it always the expression is like, oh, if the smartest guy in the room is the one who's going to learn the least. And when you look at what plants can do from a photosynthesis standpoint, being 100% efficient with that, who's to say that that is not an evolutionary advantage? I wish I could just stand outside and just start growing and not need to go to Trader Joe's, as much as I love going to Trader Joe's, right? So it's one of those things where perhaps consciousness was, evolutionarily speaking, filtered out, because consciousness, I'd argue, is a curse, right? My dog, who has some level of consciousness, right, but she doesn't have the same stresses and existential dread as I do on a Sunday night. Like she's just chilling, like she's happy, right? So who's to say that this consciousness that we prize above all else is an evolutionary advantage? In fact, it might be a detriment to us.
Well, it's very expensive. It's very expensive in terms of energy consumption, right?
Oh yeah.
In terms of our bodies, right? Our minds are one of the biggest users.
1/3 of all glucose that we produce goes to our mind.
Correct. It's expensive.
I think some folks it's probably less. Other folks it's even more.
I think we have some of them in office.
Yeah, you never know.
I mean, God, this explains why I'm hungry all the time. I'm so neurotic.
But yeah, I do think that there is just we should pause when we assert who and what species, what type of creature, living being is the smartest, most intelligent, because I mean, if I'm a plant, I can just be hanging out outside all day and I'm efficient with my energy and I know how to adapt to my conditions. That sounds pretty good to me.
Not only that, you build a community and you help each other. Like, it sounds like they really have it figured out in a way that, like, we're a species who quite often pushes when the science has pull.
I mean, to be fair, there are plants that are a little bit more, dare I say, capitalistic in some ways. Right, the black walnut is notorious for this because it's what's callelopathic, which means that it sends out chemicals into its root system that prevent other plants from growing near it. It is very possessive of its land in that way.
Oh.
You have plants that are invasive, like English ivy, kudzu, all these other things that
Tree of Heaven is one of them too. That hyper invasive, and I believe it does the same thing. It emits chemicals to ensure that other things around it can't thrive.
Oh, for sure, right? So it's not all sunshine and rainbows in plant world either. But overall, this idea of supporting group growth and success, I think, is something that we can certainly learn from.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that beautiful note, which one of us won today? And again, literally whatever that means to you. We've also had some guests proclaim themselves the winners for sitting through us.
well, I certainly won't do that. I think I'm going to have to give this one to Ryan because he did use the word photosynthesis once in the process. He did say what photosynthesis was at one point before we got into the quantum discussion. We went right into Judi Dench.
That's true.
Very quickly. So I think I got to give it to Ryan.
That's so fair.
Michael, I will tell you, this was one of my favorite ones. I will go watch A Passion for Trees now.
Yes, me too.
It's great. You have to get a VPN, though, because it's only available to stream in Canada and the UK. I had to learn what ExpressVPN was. This episode is brought to you by ExpressVPN, who gave us no money, but I am giving them a shout out.
But should.
It's actually a really beautiful documentary. I do recommend it. Ryan, congratulations. I'm actually really excited that you won, because I know you were very, very excited about this topic.
Oh, I flipped out when I found out about it last week, and I'm like, I can't wait to deep dive into this.
It was so fun having somebody who was like, yes, this is what you're actually talking about. And so thank you. That was fascinating.
Absolutely. It's fun.
And what's our topic for next week?
Oh, okay. So some hot new news on this topic that came out in the last couple weeks here. I'm going to throw the pyramids at you.
Wait, you're talking about how they found the stuff, the
pyramids? It's literally just the tip of the iceberg. There's something else going down there. Who built it? How they built it? What's it for? There's a lot of things to answer.
I love that.
Did they getting into the whole it's an energy system thing?
No, I mean, Ancient Aliens is something my dad watches quite a bit of, so they didn't get into that specifically yet, but I think there's something going on that's a little fishy over there.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. I'm very excited. We're both gonna get we're gonna nerd out really hard on this one.
Super nerd topic. I love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. And this was Whyte Noise, friends. We'll see you next week for Pyramids.